Project. Slide. The introduction is that we will define interpersonal communication, building identities, behavioral blends, barriers, promoting dialogue, communication and communication walls and how to break down barriers, and to define plan of action and overarching goals. Slide. Interpersonal communication, according to Stewart, is a subset of communication in general. This means that collaboration, choices, culture, identities, conversation, and nexting, or being silent while you listen, are all parts of interpersonal communication. Stevens maintains that there are two levels of communication. Level 1 communicating gives and receives information and discusses points of view. Level 2 communicating goes deeper than only just words. According to Burley Allen, listening is a crucial part of communicating. He states the way you listen to and respond to others will strongly influence how they will respond back to you and how they will feel about your response. Stewart also states that the more difficult elements of interpersonal communication, or IC, are deception, aggression, and betrayal. Slide. Building identities, behavioral blends. In Carbonell's book, How to Solve the People Puzzle, he introduces what he refers to as personality graphs. These graphs attempt to offer an understanding of our various personality patterns. This is referred to as a behavioral blend. This is my actual blend, DSC. And what this means is this personality type has a tendency to be passive. And I have put a negative in front of each trait to show whether it needs to be worked on or built upon if it's positive. Unusual innate driving and determined tendencies sometimes will override withdrawn and reserved ways. Slide. Often surprises with strong indications that he wants to be in charge. Doesn't seek attention, nor does he desire to be recognized. Seriously enjoys getting projects done through hard work and careful planning. Enjoys companionship of individuals more than the energy of a crowd, which might mean that he would do better as a counselor versus a public speaker. Does not seek attention or approval. People-oriented in the middle, and D, which means I can be active, task-oriented as well. Slide. Define barriers. Barriers in communication can be defined as anything that comes between the listener and the speaker. There are three key factors that may be affected by barriers, and they are as follows: perception, reception, and attention. Slide. Barriers continued. Barriers can affect all five of the senses. Burley Allen asked the question, have you ever tried to listen to someone with bad breath, body odor, or while eating something you find really delicious or even distasteful? Slide. Barriers continued. There are two other key barriers discussed in the Burley Allen text, and they are as follows: physical barriers, such as fatigue, illness, and disability, and there are also semantic barriers, meanings of words, dialect, accent, tone. These are both key factors that can cause failure in listening. Slide. Promoting dialogue. To promote dialogue, Burley Allen suggests that we must learn to be better listeners. One way to do this is to become more empathic listeners. You can clarify check what someone has said, like for example, state a what, how, or when question and then restate what you thought you heard. An accuracy check, which means restate the person's basic ideas, emphasizing the facts. And finally, feeling check. Reflect the person's feelings, paraphrase in your own words what the talker just said. Slide. Communication walls and breaking down barriers. Inhaling. I had never heard that term before taking this course, but what that means is basically what happens when we are listening. It describes the basic processes humans use to perceive anything. Or exhaling, which represents speaking. This is the output or sending part of the communication. Communication walls and breaking down barriers continued. Stevens offered what he calls the talker listening card, or the TLC approach. And what this means is there's a card on one side that says talker and the other side says listener. On the talker side, It means that the person speaking is most bothered and owns the problem, and his goals are to share feelings and thoughts without the barriers of accusing, attacking, labeling, or judging. The listener, on the other hand, when he has the listener side of the card, he's saying that I'm calm enough to hear and I don't own the problem, and his goals are to provide safety, to understand and to clarify without agreeing, disagreeing, advising, or defending. Slide. Communication walls and breaking down barriers continued. Meta messages. These are subliminal messages that are often negative and can be picked up by the listener as a complaint, or as Stewart states, the meaning that is not said, at least not in so many words. An example of this might be, you're serving red wine with fish? And the meta message here might be perceived as, you're not supposed to serve red wine with fish. Stewart states that talking about communication assists in improving in relationships by distinguishing the message from the meta message and being clear about which one you are reacting to. Slide. Communication walls and breaking down barriers continued. We're going to talk about spirals, both generative and degenerative. When communicative behaviors interlock to produce more positive feelings about the relationship, the key here is that when communicating, there is a need to encourage generative spirals and eliminate the degenerative spirals. Continue. Communication walls and breaking down barriers continued. Again, talking of spirals. This is true whether in a personal relationship or in business. In a recent article, it was said, generative inquiry involves an ethical positioning based on responsible self-involvement and collaborative co-participation. It has the potential to move us beyond the limits of what we say, think, or do, and expand our familiar embodied forms of life. Generative inquiry inspires people to find new descriptions, transform relationships, and help themselves and others cope with difficult or problematic circumstances. On the other hand, degenerative spirals, mirror images of generative spirals. The process is identical, but the results are opposite. Again, even in business, there is a recognition of the degenerative spiral. They also refer to degenerative interactions which occur when this coordination fails and the knowledge is not integrated. Plan of action using overarching goals, OAG. Now, we've covered a lot of information in a very short time, and now's the time to set an overarching goal, or an OAG, to try and facilitate this information to follow as my own. I want to be aware that IC, interpersonal communication, is comprised of choices, culture, identities, conversation, listening, most of all listening, and that nexting is very important. That communications go much deeper than words, and how you listen and respond will be a strong influence on how others reciprocate. Slide. Plan of action using overreaching goals continued. Work on behavioral blends and be aware of negative as well as positive aspects. Key factors affected by barriers are perception, reception, and attention. Maintain or be on the alert for possible physical and semantic barriers. Practice and utilize Stevens' TLC approach to better dialogue and communication. Recognize meta messages and keep messages positive. Stay on message. Encourage generative spirals while avoiding degenerative spirals. Never forget that the conversation is the relationship. Slide. Meaning is what makes the human world different from the spaces inhabited by other living beings. I could find a scripture for every one of these overarching goals. However, suffice to say that I can do all of these things through Christ Jesus, which strengthens me. I hope you enjoyed this presentation and you have a blessed day. Thank you.